much for coming out to our second, I believe, Women in Tech panel. Do we have current students here? Like, raise your hand if you're a current student. Nice, that's a good deal of you. Thank you guys. I know you've probably just spent a long day writing code, and it's great of you to like add on to that. Do we have any prospective students, people considering Flatiron School? All right, well, the people that just raised their hands will give you an in-the-trenches honest answer about what it's like here on campus. We also have some of our online students here on the front row crushing it. And we have people from the admissions team that if you guys could raise your hands, I think, well, Annette's out back, and then, oh no. Well, anyway, also, there are some people. And then we have some staff present as well. I work here as an engineer. There are some additional engineers hiding in the back. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to grab us. It is fantastic seeing everyone here. And I'd also like to thank the gentlemen for joining as well. I think a lot of times women in tech stuff gets seen as being only for women. And so a lot of times it's women having conversations with other women, and it's like, it's great, but it's also wonderful when men join as well so that they can hear the conversation and hear the stories and take part of that. So thank you guys for taking time as well. All right, we have a fantastic panel that we've put together, starting with, and I apologize because my French is horrible, but I did watch a video on your website about pronouncing it, Laurence.
I say Laurence. So
okay.
That's on Laurence.
Laurence Bradford, who is the product educator at Teachable. And then we have Karen Teng, who's the director of engineering at ClassPass, and Anita Wang, who's the UI engineer at Meetup. So that's the very brief introduction. And now, if you ladies would not mind, I'd love if you could just give your name again, and then where you work, and also sort of just what kind of projects and things you're working on right now in your job.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Laurence Bradford, and I work as a product educator at Teachable. However, I also have a few other things beyond that. I also have the site Learn to Code with Me, and I created that about 2 years ago. There's a blog and a podcast, and I am also a contributor at Forbes. So that's kind of the deal. As far as what I'm working on, I'm always working on a bunch of stuff. I'm in the middle of season 2 of my podcast right now. I also have a very active Facebook group called Newbie Coder Warehouse. We're at about 5,400 members right now, Facebook group. So yeah, if you Google Newbie Coder Warehouse, you'll find it. And a bunch of stuff going on at Teachable. It's a very busy month, the month of November. So
awesome. Hello, I'm Karen Teng. I've been working at startups for maybe the last 12 years, 10 of those in New York. So it's been interesting to kind of work at small startups, medium-sized, and then maybe now probably no longer should be a startup. It's still called a startup. Most recently, I've been at ClassPass, and the area that I focus on is kind of user acquisition, which is mostly tied with like marketing and kind of understanding how those paid channels work. So.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anita. I'm currently a UI engineer at Meetup. That pretty much just means I'm a front-end developer. I am a newbie engineer, so I've only been working as a software engineer for about 4 to 5 months now. I also came from a coding boot camp. I went to Ada Developers Academy out in Seattle, and I am new to New York, so I'm just pretty much new all around.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here and also here in New York. I, in doing research, kind of checked into your backgrounds, and you guys actually come from, I keep saying guys, how about you women, actually come from a pretty wide variety of like how you got into code. And so I'd love if you would tell your story of like how you first got interested in technology and coding and sort of the path you took to your first job as a developer. Whoever wants to start.
So I'll try to keep it short because it can be a very long story. Essentially, I studied history in college, and as well as economics, and I thought I wanted to work in economic development, specifically in Asia. So I was in Thailand immediately after I graduated college. I taught initially, and then I got a job at a think tank in their economic development, like research, floor, essentially. And I was there for about a month when I realized it was not what I wanted to do. So I had plans of going to grad school, put that on hold, and I was just doing research online, and all these forces kind of came together at once, and I ended up basically starting to teach myself how to code. So it was lack of like job opportunities in the field I thought I wanted to do. It was also, I started a travel blog at the time, so I had already been doing some stuff on WordPress. And then also just through research, of course, I kept seeing all the demand for technical workers and people in tech, developers, and especially women. There was a big lack of women I kept reading about, so.
I guess I had the more traditional background. I went to school, went to undergrad, and I came in undeclared, and I was like, I actually went in for art, fine art, strangely enough, and I realized that the school I chose was their art program was terrible. So I was just, second semester freshman year, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so, I tried out tried a bunch of courses that were like introductory and could be applied across a lot of things. So one of them was like this very basic programming course that could be applied towards like, I don't know, business or, philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. And so took it and I was hooked. And I mean, I guess, I started doing it and I was like, oh, it just makes a lot of sense. You have a bit of a struggle, but then all the pieces start fitting together. And, one by one, I think that's how I decided to go that direction. And then since then, I've just kind of taken jobs in this field.
So I am the non-traditional route. I went to college for biology, actually. And then out of college, I worked at Procter & Gamble for 5 years doing product research for feminine care products. That is a fun topic, by the way, to bring up with your male software engineer friends. But ever since I was little, I've been coding for fun. Like if you've ever heard of Neopets or MySpace, like I would love to customize stuff. So I just really got into like HTML and CSS and thought it was the most amazing thing ever. And then while I was at P&G, I was I was really dissatisfied with my job, very unhappy. I was trying to think of, what are the things that I could do that isn't this? And I found some meetups where people were learning how to code. So I started going, and I figured out that, maybe I should be doing this for a living. I applied to Ada Developers Academy. I luckily got in. I quit my job, moved across the country. I was petrified. It's the scariest decision I've ever made in my life. But it worked out, and I'm here now.
Awesome. I think that's fantastic because you guys, product of the 90s. You ladies have such a wide variety of how you came to tech, from completely self-taught to the traditional 4-year college degree to playing around with it when you were younger and coming to it after a career change where you're like, now I'm going to go to a coding boot camp, the Ada Developers Academy. And one of the things I'm wondering is what sort of ideas did you have about tech from the outside, and how were your early job experiences? Did it kind of confirm those ideas, or just it was vastly different? So sort of what you thought about tech and how you experienced it when you first joined. In any order, you please.
So each of us should answer?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a strong opinion or story you want to tell, that's fine. But yeah. Otherwise, we've just been passing mics on these panels.
Yeah, sure. Yes, the job I have now at Teachable is actually my first real full-time job. And what I mean by that is my first job as a W-2 employee. I was doing a lot of contract work, consulting, whatever you want to call it. I also was able to make money through my website and my podcast, and then of course doing a lot of writing, which the only site I still write for now is Forbes today, but I would write for a lot of different sites in the past. So that's why I think my story of getting to tech, at least as in a full-time job, I don't have a ton of experience to speak about that. But so far with my job at Teachable, it's been awesome. I feel like it's way better than I ever could have expected as far as the culture, my coworkers. I feel like it's a very diverse company. We're only 29 people, but it's about 40% of those are women, and diverse in other ways as well. So I guess to answer, it's better than I expected. So yeah.
I think the biggest learning or biggest misconception I had was like tech was only this kind of really, really low-level infrastructure thing. I just had this like stereotype of someone sitting in a cubicle in the corner with like 2 screens, they're blue, and all this and that, and that's it. And so, what I've come to find is like tech is everywhere. So any job that you get, even if you're not an official software engineer, you are using those skills. So if you're doing analytics, if you're a marketing person, like you're looking at tech things. It's permeated to all professions. There's some angle, and not just that. Every company out there has some tech component, and so maybe the company that you work at builds software, or maybe it's a company that where the company itself is the only user of that product. And so I think just knowing that there's so many opportunities to apply these skills, that's pretty amazing.
My perspective of what the tech industry was like before I got into it. I honestly thought it was like a boys' club, obviously, that you had to be super nerdy or geeky to get in, super into math. Not true. I've used very little math while programming, honestly. In many ways, it is a boys' club. You're going to be working with a lot of men, and that's just the nature of the industry right now. There's a lot of young people in this industry, but there's also a good mix of different backgrounds, I think. It could for sure improve. Yeah, so I don't think I'm the stereotypical engineer at all. I'm really into pop culture, and I don't know any of the nerdy, geeky things. So to find that I really loved this and really liked working in this field was awesome. And to be lucky enough to be working on something that I enjoy doing is just really great. So I would say don't stereotype yourself out of trying new things, because the tech industry needs you. It needs new people. It needs different perspectives, because these products are being used by everyone, not just these bros. So yeah, try to look at it from that angle.
Awesome. By the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but if any of you love tweeting and want to tweet anything that you're hearing, like, I'm not going to judge you for having your phone out. But if I see any of like this motion, right, no. So I think that's like I love what you said about don't stereotype yourself out of trying new things. And I think that applies to tech as well as sort of all areas of our life. And one of the things that's like really great is when you can find someone who's got more experience that can sort of mentor you in it. And I'm wondering if any of you had any mentors, male or female, that helped you along the way, whether it was really early on, like a older sibling that's like, I can help you with your Neopets, or someone a little further in the process that like took an interest in you and was like, oh, you should definitely learn to code more, and here are some classes you can take.
So I had a boss at my job at P&G who was just amazing. He wasn't my boss for that long. He was my boss for 6 months, and then he moved to Connecticut. But I kept in touch with him because he was super supportive, very open with me. And it was nice to have that kind of figure as I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do in my life. And, you know, I called him one day telling him, you know, I'm thinking about quitting my job and going to this boot camp. I got in, but I might say no because I was scared. And he was like, I kept telling him, you know, what's the worst thing that could happen is like, I kept picturing myself living under a bridge, like homeless, and it's not going to happen, but I have a very pessimistic outlook. But he's like telling me, you know, yeah, that could happen. It's unlikely, but what if you fly? What if everything you wanted happens and you get this job and you love it and you're doing something you love? and it kind of blew my mind. I had never even thought that that would happen. But he motivated me to try at least, you know, and I am so grateful to have him in my life.
So throughout my journey, I've had like a lot of different mentors, and some have been, when I say official, I mean I was actually in a program, and the name is completely slipping me right now, but it was with like for women in tech, and I had like a woman in tech mentor, and she used to be like CTO of, the name's slipping me, but a bank. And so I just want to encourage people, like if you see programs like that, to definitely apply to them. There's a lot out there if you do, research online. So that was really awesome. Right now, I don't actually really have like one mentor, but there's a lot of people I confide in. And the people you surround yourself with, whether it's friends, family, coworkers, for me, with a lot of the stuff I do outside my full-time job, I have a lot of help and support. It's just, it makes all the difference. And whether that's a mentor or just the people that you surround yourself with, like that's, to me, that's probably, I wouldn't be where I am without the people I've surrounded myself with, for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that sentiment. I think there's these quotes that like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you should leave. And not to say that it's ever the case, but it's all about that, like the different viewpoints and what they can bring to your own, the way you approach a problem, the way you kind of think through things. It's so impactful, and not just the short term for like a short term project or decision, but just like how you formulate your ideas in the long term. And so for myself, for a mentor, I unfortunately have never had a female mentor, like a senior female mentor. It's something that I have always wished that I did, but I did have this one. My boss at my second or third company I worked with, and we became really close, and he is the one who he started a company. He did a startup at his next venture, and he's the one who said, "Hey, why don't you come with me?" And it was like became three of us, working in a small room together, and we built this company that, up to like 40 plus people, and it was like 5 years of my life, venture backed, just a really exciting ride, and so I learned a lot from him, and not in a, I guess not in a mentor capacity, formally, but in a way where we were learning things together. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's pretty common for women in tech, if they're able to find a mentor at all right now, that mentor is very often a man, because just there haven't been a lot of women in tech for a long time before us. So if you have a senior person that's mentoring you, it tends to be, yes, a man. But that's great to know. I actually wasn't aware that there were programs that you could like sign up for that's like women in tech and mentors. And so I just
find the program's name. I'm just, yeah, it's just totally. This would have been maybe 3 years ago now. So yeah.
Have any of you ever found being a woman to be a roadblock or perhaps a benefit as you've moved through your career in tech, or just sort of a non-issue that you would like to share in public?
Okay. I found that I think it's a non-issue for myself. I think that so ClassPass, the company I work at, for those of you who are not familiar, it's like a subscription-based gym membership, where our user base skews heavily female, and so I think me being there as an engineer, like it or not, engineers are really involved with product. You're making all these like micro decisions every day that like affect your users, from like moving from the UI to like, what is this use case that we haven't like thought of, how should the user get affected by this. But having a female like myself there, I feel like really can influence a room with like what Anita was saying about a room full of men who may not have that same context. I think that is just a matter of like maybe confidence over time. I think that I think that you get used to kind of being this minority, but you kind of use that to your advantage, and you kind of speak up when you do find that what you can impart is maybe this group of men that you're with haven't maybe thought about these certain things yet.
So really for me, it's also been like a non-issue, but I also choose as much as I can to view things as like half full, not half empty, right? So of course there's situations or things where I think, in the workplace or even, outside the workplace too, where I think, this situation would be so much easier if I wasn't a woman, right? So great, just like examples, you would think like, the company golf trip or different kinds of networking things, or a great one, fantasy football at my company, which I mean, a lot of the women did play, and a lot of women were actually, I think the person winning is a woman at my company right now, but just things like that just don't interest me. So sometimes in that sense, it could feel a bit isolating, but overall, it's definitely been a non-issue. And I do think that there's so many ways that you can use it to your advantage. As Karen mentioned, you have like a unique perspective, and everyone's using the products and in the software that you're building. So having that perspective is really valuable.
So I have a unique experience in that the coding bootcamp I went to was all women. It's 100% female. So I started out this journey being surrounded by women coding. So it's a very uncommon experience, I think. I know. And the first team that I was actually on in Meetup was 100% women, which is crazy. I never thought in my life that would happen, but it did. Being a woman amongst women was fine. But I did intern at a company where the team was all men, and I honestly also didn't think it was an issue. You're going to always get the asshole who says something stupid or does something stupid, and maybe they're not conscious of it. And it's not necessarily your responsibility to, teach them stuff, but I felt, in my perspective, I think it's nice to call people in, to tell them if you do feel uncomfortable when you're experiencing something as a woman in the field, when you're surrounded by men, to just let them know. Because sometimes people just aren't conscious of the fact that they're doing something or treating you differently. But yeah, I have been surrounded by women in my short career, and it's been awesome.
That's definitely a very unique experience.
Yes.
I remember just going from being a student at Flatiron School, where my class was around 40% women, to my first tech meetup, where I was like, the only women in this room are women from my class. So certainly having that experience and then having like teams of women is definitely unique. How do you help your teams build culture, both as individual contributors and as the manager? Is it something that you feel that you can really help shape things very proactively, or more just through acts of calling people in and being like, hey, actually, when you say things like that, it can make people feel like outsiders? Sort of what ways do you think you can help build inclusive spaces for women as well as other minorities in your teams?
I feel like you, especially because you have so much experience. So I'm so again newer at my company, but I will say, I think having like a diverse team, and when I started, that was the case. So lots of different kinds of people work there, women, men, different ethnicities, and so forth. I think that like is so key. And I remember when I was interviewing for jobs, this doesn't really answer the question totally, but I was very aware of women being in leadership roles at companies I was looking at. And you can just go to the company website and see. A lot of them will have the about page, and there'll be the list, especially if it's a larger company like the VPs or the the C-level folks. So, and because I just feel like that just says so much when there's women in leadership at the companies. So at the one that I work for, one of our heads is a woman. So that was good going in and seeing that. And then as far as building it, I feel like I right now at my company, I don't have a huge part in building the culture. Well, aside from actually being there, which I think is like being and seeing is believing, and being a woman being there, you're affecting the culture. But we, like the CEO at my company is very, I don't even for instance, like if he sees something like inappropriate, like happening in the workplace, or something that would be making a woman feel uncomfortable, he'll go out of his way to whoever's the person doing it, make a person feeling uncomfortable, to like nip it right when it starts, and very proactive in that sense. So
Yeah, in terms of building culture, I think so within our engineering organization, it's really diverse in the sense of maybe the gender balance could be improved, but it's diverse in the sense that there's a lot of international folks. There's people from the LGBT community. There's females. There's myself. Yeah. And also there's a big age range. And so in terms of building culture, we have a lot of events where we kind of share like our past and our background, similar in this form of but in maybe a more casual setting, but like, why did you get into engineering? What do you love to do outside of these things? And like kind of what made you come to New York? Are you here for New York for the job, or because of the city, or like what do you hope to accomplish while you're here? And like all these type of future things that really get you to understand these people that you're working with really closely. I think we have a lot of like, and we also do that without being in a bar situation, without like drinking, without alcohol, because I think while alcohol helps, sometimes helps the situation, I think like having these like kind of more sober moments to where we can really reflect has really helped, because you can understand like, the way they're speaking is not because they're upset, it's because this is their attitude on this particular subject.
So I've only been at my company for 5 months, maybe, like I said. So I think in the ways that I've contributed to the culture is just participating in discussions. Yeah, my CEO is very open and likes to talk a lot. So he invites us to talk about certain social issues that are happening in our country. So I will participate. I'm the kind of person who is proactive about things that I want. So like if at the company that I work at, I felt like it was I didn't feel like there was a very social aspect to it, which is really weird because it's Meetup. So I was like, how about I organize a meetup for the new people at Meetup? So I did. I just organized one, and I invited all the new people to come out and have a happy hour and just get to know each other, because I didn't know anyone. I just moved to New York. So just very simple things like that can help contribute to the company culture. Building relationships with people in your company, and just contributing your opinion. You're there because the company wants you to share your life experience and share your unique perspective. I do also want to say that this depends, your ability to contribute to the culture depends on the size of the company that you're working at. So for example, if you're working at like Microsoft, where there's thousands of employees, there's going to be unique cultures on every team. Whereas if you're working at a smaller company and there's like maybe around 50 people there, your impact on the culture is much greater. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love sort of the diverse approaches there, whether it's going out and proactively organizing a meetup, or the concept of helping with diversity just by being a diverse person in the room that's speaking up. And one of the things that I try to remember from having a very small outsider's perspective, because at least being a white woman in tech, I'm still like the majority minority, like one of sort of the largest minorities that are in tech. Remembering that like if there are things that other people do without realizing that make me feel uncomfortable, there are probably things I do that make people feel like outsiders. And even just things I wouldn't think, like always making references to Seinfeld, thinking, well, everyone's seen Seinfeld. And it's like, well, a lot of people in a certain demographic have seen it, but it wasn't popular across all demographics, and that can be like really off-putting. And I think like that's one of the great things about having that like sometimes outsider perspective is you can be more sensitive to that and be like, yeah, the person doesn't know, but also like I might be doing the same thing. Laurence, one of the things that you mentioned that I thought was great was your approach of looking at the website and looking for like a diverse technical staff and a diverse team and women in leadership. And I was wondering if any of the rest of you, or if you as well, have additional hints for how to approach a job search. We have a lot of students in the room that are either already searching or will be searching soon. And just any tips for how they can approach it to find a good fit, or red flags that they should watch for to know that they should exit as quickly as possible.
So I just most recently went through this job search not too long ago. The recruiting process of a company tells you a lot about that company. Meeting with people and talking to them, to me, was the best way to figure out what their company culture was like. Try not to go into any place with any preconceived notions. Especially if that company is a huge company, they're going to have some type of reputation, and it's not always accurate. So I went through the job application process with my fellow classmates. There were 24 of us total, all women. So I got many different perspectives from everyone. I remember one of my classmates was looking at this sports media company to apply to, and they had just released an advertisement basically targeting men and saying how only men liked to do this sports thing and how it was a bro culture, and that kind of marketing that they put out was really telling about what they thought was important or the type of people that work there. Or there's certain questions that you can ask just to learn more about what it is that they value, looking at the company's mission, looking at the diversity of that company's workforce, asking about work-life balance. It's something that everyone asks, but asking in a different way that's pointed so that it gives you a more realistic answer. So like, what time did you leave yesterday? Exactly. Tell me. How long do people go out for lunch together? That tells you about their work culture a lot. So just asking very targeted, specific questions of the companies that you're interested in gives you a lot of information about them.
Okay, yeah, I feel like there's so much to be said about this. And I was going through sort of my own job search not that long ago. So looking at the people who are interviewing you, and as you mentioned, like the whole recruitment process is so telling. So even I recall like some not so positive experiences I had. And looking back now, there are these little things, like even just the email exchanges between the person doing the recruiting, I guess you could say, or setting up the interviews then. I think that could be very telling. Like, are they responsive? And even if you don't get the job, right, there's still, I think there should still be a certain level of professionalism and as like responsiveness, like getting back within a certain amount of time, not taking 2 weeks or something like that. And then as far as the actual interviews themselves, yeah, looking at who's interviewing you. I remember some place I was interviewing at, I think I spoke to 5 or 6 people and only one of them was a woman. And that kind of to me, I don't know how I feel about that, especially at a bit larger company. And then during the interview, I liked your tip about asking certain questions. And one thing I love to ask, and I always recommend people do the same, is asking the interviewer, like, what's your favorite thing about working here? Or, why do you love to work here? And I think if, you can just tell by like their body language. And if they start to rattle off on a 5-minute tangent about how much they love to work at the company, that's like a really awesome sign, right? If they're just like, oh, I like what I do. That's kind of, I feel like that says a lot. So yeah. Oh, and then the most important thing I think to always keep in mind as well is remember that you're interviewing them, right? They're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. So to ask those kind of personal questions, like Anita mentioned, that's so important. And really think about if you're going to be a good fit there. I think a lot of people get too caught up in like the technical interview and them, impressing the interviewers, but it goes both ways. So.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. You're the one who's going to be there for however long you're going to be, so you want to make sure that not just the culture, but just like what the product, their vision, what they're going to be planning to do in the next upcoming year or two is jives with what would excite you as well. So. I've recently been more on the other end where I see a lot of candidates come in, and so the key things about what makes a successful candidate in my eye is someone that can really communicate well. And so a lot of times we find that if this person is maybe technically sound but if they're just not able to communicate their thoughts and their ideas, whether it's like whiteboard coding or coding on a laptop, that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to see. And so even before you start writing anything, you want to just rephrase the question that was just worded to you, and then ask any clarifying questions. Actually, the more, the better. You want to make sure you've hit that as clear as possible, and then think through what you're going to do, talk about it. It should be a conversation. It's kind of fun in some ways, and I don't know, the communication is the biggest aspect for us as we're looking, because sometimes these specs, like sometimes what you're building isn't clear, and day to day you need to be asking these questions because you'll be saving a lot of time in the long run for the company and for yourself. Yeah, of course.
So one thing I wanted to mention, especially since we're here, when you're applying to jobs coming from a coding bootcamp, you're going to get a lot of prejudice about coding bootcamps in general. A lot of people don't think that your background is good enough, that you're going to be a hassle to train. It is your job to prove to them that they're wrong, pretty much. So, for example, one of my classmates applied to a company, and she got an email back from the recruiter right away saying, hey, we're only hiring senior devs right now. That's really common, by the way, which is fine. But just basically rejecting her right away. So she wrote an email back saying, hey, thanks for emailing me back. I appreciate it. I was looking at your job listing, and I saw that you're looking for this. This is what I've done. She made a bullet point list, gave examples, explained how she would do some stuff at the company. They called her back and scheduled for her for an interview. And she actually got a job offer at this place. So they're gonna think that you're not up to par sometimes, just because a lot of places are looking for a traditional CS background. It's bullshit. That's my opinion.
So sort of on that note of interviewing, what are sort of the biggest mistakes that either if you've been involved in any parts of the hiring process that you've seen candidates make during that, or if you haven't been a part of that, certainly you've interviewed and maybe mistakes that you felt you made during the interview process or that your friends made, because I know during the process you'll call up your friend and be like, I did the most boneheaded thing. I just like if you have anything like words of wisdom to share, things to avoid in the process.
I guess I would say when you're doing an interview, it's never going to be perfect. And so the biggest thing is to not let that slip you up. We actually, as an interviewer, I expect you to expect there to be bugs or issues or anything that you're like developing or writing up, and it's all about kind of identifying that, and then there's that conversation that develops from that.
Confidence in yourself goes a long way. If you're not confident, you're scared, you're nervous, that's fine. But if you're constantly doubting yourself when you're going into an interview, you're not going to perform as well. one of my classmates took a longer time to find a job because she was seriously doubting herself. She had the skills, and we all knew that she did, but she just didn't believe in it. So be confident. Show them who you are. Show them that you can do this, and put your best self forward and just be yourself.
Yes, I love that one. Confidence and believing in yourself. I feel like believing in yourself is like the foundation of the house, and everything else is kind of built on top of that. And we all have family and friends, but I feel like at the end of the day, it really has to come from like within, like having that confidence and just belief in yourself. But yeah, aside from that, one of the things, there's like two things we do when we interview people that we think about. Well, one is just like a passion. So even if we've interviewed people that are very like tech, great past job experience and they're tech savvy, but then you ask them, what's something that you built recently that has you excited? And they just give like a one-word answer. That kind of, at least for us, that's sort of, this doesn't really fit with our culture. Especially because I work at an ed tech company, so we're all about learning and education. So that's one thing. Another thing I like to ask too is on a similar note with education, like something that they taught themselves recently and how they went about it. And of course, this is I am at an ed tech company, so that kind of fits with like our culture and like what we're all about. And it's interesting not so much what they learned, but how they went about it. That's always to me.
So on the topic of confidence, I think imposter syndrome has been sort of a buzzword in tech, and I'm just wondering if what are your thoughts about imposter syndrome, and has there ever been a moment or a 6-month interview period of time that you felt like you're an imposter, that you don't really belong in tech, and if so, how did you overcome it, and if not, how do you avoid that?
I have heavy imposter syndrome. Like just being on this panel, I feel like an imposter. Like I'm new. I shouldn't be here. She's a director. She's been working forever. Like I don't belong here. I've talked to many people that I've worked with about imposter syndrome because I'm constantly feeling it. I definitely feel it as a new engineer. I definitely feel it coming from a different background and changing careers. From what I have gathered from even people who have worked in this industry for 20 plus years, you are always going to feel imposter syndrome. You might feel it different ways. You might think you're an imposter because of one thing, and another person's going to think they're an imposter because of something else. But that feeling doesn't really go away. You just have to brave through it and just keep on doing things. Like don't let it hold you back, and don't let it get so big that it prevents you from doing the things that you should be doing or that you want to do. And that's it.
Yeah, so it's funny that you should say that because I definitely feel that imposter syndrome. Like no matter how long you're in this field, which I'm probably even though I've been in it for over a decade, that's nothing compared to like a lot of my colleagues. You're never going to know everything, and so sometimes it just feels like, okay, can I contribute to this conversation? And it's okay if you right then and there have nothing to talk about, and that just gives you an opportunity to go learn, to go read, to like soak in all that knowledge, and then next time this comes around, you have something to contribute to the table. So I find myself kind of like feeling that a lot in some cases, but then when a conversation arises where you do have that, then you're like, okay, yes, this is why I'm here, and this is how I can contribute.
Yeah, so I feel like I go through like moments where I feel imposter syndrome. Some days I don't, maybe weeks I don't, and there's other times where it kind of like hits you almost like it just hits you like right in the face, right? But I feel like over time I've actually developed some pretty good ways to kind of like to cope with it and to kind of, I don't want to say like totally overcome it, but to help overcome it. And I think first of all, I think everyone's different. Everyone experiences it differently, and everyone has different like ways to kind of go about like lessening it. Personally, for me, I love to write. That's how I express myself, and I love to write like publicly for like blog posts for people to read, but also privately. So writing is a huge thing for me. And so whenever I'm feeling upset, I always write. And then aside from that, I have this app, it's an iPhone app called 5-Minute Journal. And I do that every morning. And you can also do it at night. I sometimes miss it at night, but since I've been doing that, like just like my confidence, my belief in myself has changed so much. So every morning it's 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you're going to do that day, and then daily affirmations. So like positive self-talk essentially. And I usually will do it like on the subway or something every morning on my way to work. And that really sets my day up like for success. And when I don't do it, it's like, I feel weird. Like it's like my day isn't as good. And then even actually today I didn't do it, but on my way here I did it, which was like 6 at night.
You're like, I'm going to be on a panel. I got to get those affirmations.
Yeah,
in.
no, seriously. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I'm grateful for. And just being grateful for things. I feel like, yeah, it helps.
Right. Well, we're going to do one more question and then open it up to the audience for questions. But I would love to know if you have any advice for people that are currently learning to code, how they can get the most out of their education.
I'll keep it short and sweet. So be committed, be serious about your learning, and whether you're at a coding boot camp or just learning on your own, like take it really seriously. And you have to do it every day. Like you have to learn every day. And I'm so fortunate that I get to talk to people on through my podcast, people who have families, full-time jobs. He has 2 kids, full-time job, and he was a Lyft driver. And he was learning on his own. He went to a part-time coding boot camp, and he transitioned. He got a new job as a web developer in like 9 months, but he stopped. During this time, he stopped drinking. He stopped going out. He said he stopped like watching sports. He just committed, right? He just committed, and yeah, it just takes grit and perseverance.
I guess for me, it's when you're learning, kind of take some time to understand the hows, and so not just get to the. It's great to solve the problem, but understand why these things are fit together and how these things work. Because if I can tell you anything, it's that technology and platforms, frameworks, they keep changing. There's like a million a year, and you're not going to be able to keep up. And so you don't really learn the tool. You kind of learn how to learn the tool. And so, or how to pick up these languages, how to pick up these frameworks, and kind of understanding these similarities between languages or any tools that you pick up. And so that has helped me a lot because technology has changed and it's been so rapid in that advancement.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that grit is super important. Just really committing yourself, and if this is something that you have a passion for and that you want to do, then do it all the time. Don't overdo it. Don't burn out, but but also as you keep learning, it's a process. For me, it was learning how to ask the right questions, because you're never going to know everything. Karen said, her name's Karen, right? Okay. Sorry. But as you keep learning, you just learn to ask the right questions. And honestly, I feel like I'm just a really good Googler now. No one knows everything, especially programmers. That's why things like Stack Overflow exist, So just keep pushing and keep asking questions.
I love that your point about no one knows everything. So I have a brother-in-law who's he's that, other than he doesn't live in his parents' basement, he started coding when he was 8, and he's a C developer and just brilliant. And it seems like he knows everything. And one day I was just like, man, I can't wait till I'm like you and I don't have to Google anything anymore. And he's like, I am on Stack Overflow every day. The only difference is we're asking different questions. And I just gave him a huge hug because that was great encouragement instead of being like, well, maybe someday. He's just like, no, what you're doing is programming. That's how it works, whether you've been doing it for a couple weeks at Flatiron School or a few months on your own or 20 years. It is just about learning how to Google the right answers. I mean, you also know some stuff, but
Yeah.
but Google is your friend.
I actually recently saw a post where this guy, he was Googling some problem, and he found the answer in Stack Overflow, and then he realized later that he was the one who asked the question 2 years ago. So even if you learn it once, you're not going to remember it again like 2 years from now. It's okay if you
Also,
forget.
when you Google and the link has been clicked before, and you're like, I guess I've been here before. So we would love to open this up to all of you. If you have any questions that weren't asked or you have anything you'd like to follow up on, just go ahead and raise your hand. And we're going to have the panelists repeat the question. You don't each have to repeat it, but repeat it just so we can get it on the video. But over here.
Yeah, I mean, Karen touched on it a little bit, but when you guys were making the decision.
How do you make the decision between working in some place like Silicon Valley versus New York City? Is that what the gist of it is? You know, everyone has different pros and cons for themselves. Like I said, I was in Seattle, so I applied to jobs in Seattle, and I also applied to jobs in New York City and other cities. I got a few offers. I honestly made a pros and cons list, and in the end, 2 of the companies were tied, and I just went with a gut feeling. Yeah, it's probably not the best advice, but yeah, that's what I did.
I mean, for me, it's like, where do you want to build your life? I mean, there's work and then there's life. I grew up like, I don't know, 2 minutes from like in Cupertino, like 2 minutes from Apple. Like my parents still live there. It's like weird. I go to their house and it's like down the street is like Apple HQ with the like spaceships, circular design. It's really odd. And so for me, when I moved to San Francisco, and then I was like, I came to New York. I don't know, 12 years ago, and I was like, I fell in love, and I was like, I need to be here. I need to be here. So I did the opposite. Like I left Silicon Valley and I came to New York because I felt this energy. And I mean, luckily, the New York tech scene kind of grew. And so, but I think that anywhere you feel drawn to like there will be opportunities there. Because like I said, there's tech in everything.
Yeah, when I was making a decision of where to work a few months ago, the other places I was interested in, one was in San Francisco, one was here, obviously, where I am. Another one was actually like kind of by LA. I personally, like, I was really thinking more about the company and like my future at the company. Like there were a few things that were really important to me, and like for everyone's going to be different. You just define like what you value. But for me, it was like mobility, having a voice. Part of the reason why I ended up at such a small company, because I felt like if I was at like a 5,000 person company, I would just kind of get lost in the masses. And that was something that I valued a lot. And it just so happened that New York was where the company was I was based. But I am really happy being here in New York. I think it's it's like the best city in the world. I mean, come on. It is.
Awesome. I think you had a question as well?
Oh, I definitely said it. I mean, it's where, God. How did I bring up the fact or include or exclude the fact that I went to a boot camp in the job interview process? You have to say it. I mean, it's part of how you got your tech skills, you know? Like, you can't just ignore it. I think the advantage of coming from a program that's non-traditional is that you have background in other things. Which a lot of tech people don't have, and that they're missing, that these companies need. You're coming from a different background where you're developing soft skills. Soft skills are really important. Engineers need to be able to explain what it is they're doing to people. They need to be able to communicate. Like Karen said, it's really important to actually communicate with people. It's not just tech-based, you know? But also proving that you know your skills from this boot camp are relevant, that you had a lot of practical knowledge from doing project after project after project in this boot camp, you know? Like, that is not something that everyone does when they're in college for CS. They have a lot of theoretical knowledge, maybe insight into how things were developed historically. On the job, that's not as important, you know? So phrasing it that way. and making them realize that you have a lot more practicality in the experience that you got from this boot camp, and that your experience prior to attending this boot camp is an important skill that you're bringing that people coming straight out of college don't have. So talk about it.
Karen, as a director that does interviewing and things, how would you recommend that people, when they're in the interview process, like how would you recommend they frame having gone to a boot camp?
I mean, I think going to a boot camp it's pretty common. It's one of the backgrounds. It's like traditional, whatever, CS degree, boot camp, self-taught, etc. And so, I think if you're just honest with it, I don't think it's something that you downplay or upplay. It's just this is my background and this is where I'm coming from in terms of like these are the things I know. And I would list the projects, I would list the tools that you use or the frameworks, languages within that. It's all about like it's a means to an end, and the end product is you. So. So the question was what the work-life balance is like, and how you can look for things based on what, like, in terms of what you yourself want to be in. I'm hoping, and maybe this is a tiny small sample size, that that the long crazy hours, like, go big or go home, like just like late hours, is hopefully more of a thing of the past. I think that like employers and companies know now that like work-life balance is important, because like there's diminishing returns, after a certain time. And this is a oft quote used as, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And so I'm hoping that that's the direction that places are going. But I also think that it's definitely cultural. And so like what Anita said about asking those right questions during the interview is so important. I really liked the way you phrased those. I think those are really, really key. And for myself, I really value a work-life balance. And that's something when I'm trying to sell ClassPass to people, that's what I tell them. And I kind of describe like, day to day and why it's important. And I say that we expect, if you're not getting things done, and if you don't feel like you're getting things done in the X hours allotted to you, be it like 40 or 45 hours in that week, that's because something's wrong with our process. And so it's not you, it's not, how much more time and effort you need to put in. It's just kind of our process and allotment of that time.
I think work-life balance is also something that you kind of own yourself, beyond looking at it from the company's perspective. Some people at my work stay until 9 o'clock at night. That's on them. I do not. I refuse to do that. So you're in control of your own work-life balance, honestly. Some companies are also like crazy, probably. I haven't worked at those type of companies, so I can't say. But, I don't show up to work until like maybe 10 or 10:30, which is probably really late for some people. And then I leave about 8 hours later. I get my work done. I've always felt like work-life balance is on me. If I want to stay, I stay. Yesterday, I stayed at work for 12 hours, but mostly because I just wanted to work. But I feel like you have to make your own schedule and determine if the company is free and open to that. So like Meetup, for example, you show up whenever you want. Some people show up to work at 11 or 12, and you leave whenever you want. So asking stuff like that, like, do they have a fixed schedule in terms of when you need to show up and when you need to leave? If I have a doctor's appointment, what is the process? Like, can I stay home and work from home? If I need to be out because I need to drop off my child to daycare or do some family things, is that allowed? Asking stuff like that in general gives you a good idea of how open they are to having a free and open time schedule.
I guess, you guys really hit the nail on the head with both of those. But a lot of job listings, if you're looking online or even just a company website, it'll say, if at least I remember when I was applying to where I am now, it says like flex work schedule. Is that the right word? Yeah. So I mean, similar probably to both Meetup and ClassPass. It's kind of like you can sort of come when you want, unless of course you have a meeting or something. We do have like company meetings or team meetings. Then you do have to be there at 10 a.m. that day, and then leave when you want, as long as you're getting your work done. We have some people at my company work from home a bit more. Others don't. Personally, I like to go into the office. Like like when I stay at home, I get a little crazy. Like I like to get out and be around people. So as I think you both mentioned, asking those questions during the interview, and you should be able to get an answer, I think. But I think overall tech is very like accommodating. Like I think as far as like career or industries go, for people like who want remote jobs, people who want to work from home, people who want like flexible schedules and be able to take vacations a lot, I think tech is like a great industry to be in for that.
Any other? Yeah. Did any of you interview at any places that their stack was different than what you had already learned? So I know your background was you started with Python and then moved into Ruby and Rails, and so I'm just wondering like if you interviewed anywhere that was like, no, it's just.
But also all the jobs I interviewed for were not. Some of them had coding part of the job, but it was so I really wanted to be like an ed tech and do like kind of like curriculum development. And now my title is product educator, so I actually don't code in my day to day. So I don't think I'm
I guess I would find it. So the question was whether you've either of us encountered a situation where the skills that you personally know and then like what your employer is looking for differs. Is that okay? So I would I definitely think so. Like actually what I said earlier about understanding. Like syntax is syntax in terms of like different languages, but understanding like the core of how languages work, how you think about things, how you approach and like model your program is the same, is fundamentally the same across all languages. And so for us, while we look for engineers that know JavaScript, or if you're working on front end things, or back end if you know Python or Java. If you know Ruby and Ruby's not in our stack, that's totally fine. You still interview in it, and you write whatever code you can in that, and then we just expect you to kind of like pick it up along the ways because you've already understood like the background and the underpinnings of that language. Because like you said, like we all say, like you can just look up that syntax on Stack Overflow, but you can't really kind of make up all that deep background knowledge otherwise. And so for me, it's not important at all. It's all about like the concepts and understanding how to break down a problem, and again, communication.
I interviewed for several jobs where the stack was something that I didn't learn in my boot camp. So I learned Ruby and Rails and JavaScript. And I interviewed for a company that did Python mainly. I interviewed for a position that required Angular. I had never used Angular before. So like Karen said, it's more about knowing how to go about solving a problem and your ability to explain your thought process and communicate that versus the specific syntax of a language. One good thing to know is knowing which stack the company that you're applying for is using and asking them if it's okay that you use whatever language you're most comfortable with in the interview process. So even though I applied for a company that used Python, I asked if I could use Ruby in my interview, which they said was fine, but then they made me write in JavaScript, so it was kind of weird. But so asking those questions before you even do the interview are important. And always write in the language that you're most comfortable with in the interview. The interview process is going to be a lot more comfortable and easy if you're doing something that you're already familiar with. They don't, like Karen said, the syntax doesn't matter. It's more about how you're going about solving a problem and explaining it to the person who's interviewing to you. Because there's so many commonalities in different languages that it's going to be, you can just look it up. Like she said, it doesn't matter.
I also think it's very common for stacks to change over time, even within the company, and companies know that. So I work here at Flatiron School, and you would think, okay, Ruby and JavaScript, that's all I need to know. And then yeah, they'll throw new things at you, like the IDE is written in Go, and one of the people that came out of our program had to learn Go. We recently started switching over to React, and so the entire dev team, none of whom had gone through the program learning React, had to switch over to React. And that's just so incredibly common that I don't think are very many companies out there that are like, oh, if you haven't had 6 years of experience in our stack alone, we're not going to hire you, unless they're looking for someone with like very senior specific knowledge. So we have time for one more question. All right, back there. So I guess thinking about how you guys interview at your individual companies, what tips would you give someone about how best to prepare for your specific interviews?
Yeah, so I mean, again, like using the Google skills, I would research like anyone. I would try to get the name of the person interviewing me. Sometimes companies don't tell you, but if I got like the first and last name, I would pretty much like social media stalk that person, see what they did, like if they have a blog, if they have social media, just to, I feel like knowledge is power, right? So if you go into the interview knowing more about them than they may know about you, that's definitely an advantage right there. Aside from that, it was actually hard where I work now because it's such a small company. Like we didn't even have like a Glassdoor profile, but things like Glassdoor and other websites like that can be such a wealth of knowledge also about, I mean, heck, on Glassdoor you can find like common interview questions at Google and it'll give you a whole list for the exact role and like scenario questions. So definitely doing research about the company who's interviewing you.
Yeah, I'd second that. I'm always impressed when the person has taken time out to play around with the product, and gives that feedback. And, like, that they really want to be there. They really want to join the company because they've put in that like extra effort into it. And then, besides that, I think if you want, I think you should just ask the interviewer or whoever you've been working with thus far, like what types of questions should I expect? What should I like brush up on, if anything? I think it will give you an understanding of like how it's going to be broken down, whether there's going to be questions that you're going to be coding, or if it's more like a design, or if the language, if you can come in with any language of your choice, et cetera, et cetera. So that should help.
Yeah, definitely asking questions about the upcoming interview, if you can, to the recruiter is going to be helpful. For me, when I was applying to jobs, I made an extensive spreadsheet of every single company I applied to, how large it was, who was the person I emailed, what date I emailed them, what did they respond, what date did they respond, what did the message say, what are some other pros and cons on the company, how did the interview go, do I have a next interview? I kept track of everything. So I was intense about it. So beyond just like going crazy like I did, I think another thing I did is I knew that I was really nervous about doing the tech problems and whiteboarding. Whiteboarding scared the crap out of me because I'd never really done it in a real interview. So I got together with my friends and just practiced like almost every single day. Have them ask you questions, mock interviews, do mock interviews with people who are in the industry, not just your friends, because it's a different experience. Have them give you feedback, find people who are willing to do that with you. Practice made a lot of difference in my experience.
Sorry. Two resources for technical interviewing prep. Interviewcake.com. Parker, he's actually he actually is in my office at the WeWork I go to. He's in an office down the hall. And then Pramp is another one. Pramp, and then is there any more? You seems like you guys any more? I'm forgetting those two. Okay, those two. Okay, I feel like there's another I'm missing, but yeah. Interview Cake, and then Pramp. Yeah, Pramp. And is Pramp still free? They used to be free. Okay, Pramp's free.
I used a site called LeetCode. I don't know if that still exists, but it just has a bunch of questions that companies. They're all whiteboarding questions because it's hard to come up with whiteboarding questions on your own. Like no one asks those questions in real life because they're weird. But LeetCode has a bunch of questions from different types of companies. What's nice is that they also rank them by level of difficulty. So you can start with easy, then go to medium. The hard ones on there are really hard. I've never experienced getting asked any of those type of questions. So if you can't do it, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But leak code.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our panelists for joining us, sharing their experience and their wisdom gleaned from their time in tech. Some of the things that I think really stood out were just that having a non-traditional background has been more of a benefit to a hindrance and has sort of helped you to bring even more value to your company because you have a point of view that isn't going to be the most common point of view, and not being afraid to speak up and make sure that if you're not getting what you need, whether it's the right leaving time or meeting new people at the company, you can always go to Meetup and set up meetups and find other people to do those things with, or come to groups like this. But just that overall, I think the tide is starting to shift, and we're starting to see people have fewer negative experiences as women in tech, as opposed to like the past, which I think is fantastic and hopefully is very promising for all of the women in this room. And we'd love to have you guys stay and continue to mingle with each other, talk. We still have snacks. Can ask any questions you didn't have a chance to ask during the panel. But thank you so much for joining. Yes,